Hello, my name is Tara Ronsleben. I am a graduate student certified in human sexuality working on a master's in the field, and I think we should talk about herpes. Herpes simplex virus. The herp. The gift that keeps on giving. Let's talk about it. Infection with HSV is insanely common, but there's still a lot of shame and confusion around the topic, so let's clear some of that up. There are actually two types of HSV, HSV1 and HSV2. Now these are normally separated as oral herpes versus genital herpes, but HSV1 can actually show up in both places, and HSV2 generally sticks to the genitals. Like I said, HSV is crazy prevalent. More people have HSV1 in the world right now than people who don't have it. And HSV2 is also really common, with about 12% reported cases. The thing about HSV, and the reason I was emphasizing the word reported, is that HSV is a super sneaky virus. A lot of people will have HSV without ever realizing it, which means a lot of people will be spreading HSV without ever realizing it. And while treatable, HSV1 and 2 are both lifelong and incurable. But before we get into the ways that you can treat HSV, let's start by discussing the differences between HSV1 and HSV2. Now, HSV1 is the one you're probably more familiar with being called cold sores or fever blisters. Anyone who's ever gotten a cold sore knows how annoying they are. That ominous tingling feeling followed by a painful blister that pops up in the same spot every time, that seeps and weeps and then crusts over and leaves an ugly scab until eventually your lips come back from kissing purgatory. Most people who have HSV1 don't even remember the first time they got the infection, as it's most commonly caught during childhood from sharing a cup with another kid at school or a kiss from a visiting aunt. It can be spread through razors, lipsticks, utensils, sharing anything that touches the mouth. And once you have it, which is why it's so common. I have it. I had one a couple weeks ago. You'll see a picture of it in the thumbnail because I'm sharing too much, clearly. I got them a lot more often as a kid, maybe, I don't know, 1 or 2 a year. And now they pop up every few years. Knock on wood that I don't have another anytime soon. The initial outbreak is always the worst, coming with flu-like symptoms and lasting for 2 to 3 weeks. Subsequent infections usually occur when your immune system is run down, when you are overworked or not sleeping well or are fighting off another infection, and can come with fevers and swollen lymph nodes as well. For some people, outbreaks may happen every few months, and for others it may be years between infections, or you may get it once and then never have it pop up again. Between outbreaks, the virus stays in your system but sits dormant in a cluster of nerve cells near the back of your ear. Those who can recognize the early warning signs can try and treat it as quickly as possible, which is going to be the best way to keep it short and keep it as comfortable, I guess, as it can be. Over-the-counter antiviral products like doconazole, which is sold under the name brand of Abreva in the United States, can knock down the length of a cold sore outbreak to less than 10 days if caught very early on. There are also prescription oral antivirals you can take at the first sign of a cold sore coming on, like these. I'm going to cover up that personal info, but these I received from NewRx, which is an online pharmacy, using a telehealth specialist. And these you would take at the first tingling signs along with your topical ointments like Abreva. There are also preventative doses of the oral antivirals that you can take if you have an autoimmune condition or any other chronic condition that makes you more prone to flare-ups. While there are some people who experience asymptomatic viral shedding, as we discussed, some people never know they have it and can still spread it. For the most part, people are only able to spread the virus when they're actively shedding, as in when they're actively having an outbreak. That means anytime you're experiencing any sort of pain or tingling, blisters or itching, you need to be very careful about what or who your mouth is touching. Wash your hands as much as you can and avoid touching where the blister is, as the virus can pass from your mouth to your hands and then whatever you touch with your hands. And remember that I said that HSV-1 can also affect the genitals. So avoid oral sex at all costs if you have any inkling that a cold sore may be coming on, and until the skin is completely healed, as it can cause a genital infection. Those who want to be extra cautious should know that a large percentage of initial genital herpes infections are due to asymptomatic shedding, meaning someone transmitting the virus who has no symptoms of the virus and may have no idea that they have it. Using barrier methods like dental dams and condoms during both oral sex and penetrative sex are going to be the best bet for preventing transmission. HSV-2 is the one we more often call herpes, even though HSV-1 and HSV-2 are essentially the same virus. Initial outbreaks of genital herpes also often come with those flu-like symptoms that last for 2 to 3 weeks, but the most obvious symptom, the sores around the groin, upper thighs, and anus, often don't actually show up. And that's why so many people likely have the virus and have no idea. They think they've caught the flu or a cold. Because it is a virus, our body builds up an immune response like it does to any other virus, but antiviral medications like acyclovir or valacyclovir, I'm trying to show this without also giving away all of my personal information. They can be used to reduce healing time and to lengthen the amount of time in between outbreaks. Between outbreaks, as long as there aren't any symptoms like the tingling, itching, any visible sores, any broken skin, transmission isn't very likely. However, once again, condoms and dental dams are going to be your best bet, as asymptomatic shedding is a thing. You may think, well, just go get a test for it. However, the sneakiness of HSV means it's very difficult to test for, especially in asymptomatic folks, as unless you're actively having a flare-up, actively shedding, it is very difficult to catch the virus on a test. So unless you have very lucky timing and happen to have a doctor's appointment right at the time you're starting to have an infection and already have an STI test planned, or you go to a doctor because you are actively experiencing symptoms, it's very unlikely to pop up on a swab test, and blood tests can be limited in that a sample taken too soon after the initial infection during the incubation period of the virus is unlikely to detect it in that as well. False negatives often occur during dormant phases of the virus, and false positives can occur in people who don't even have it. This is why a lot of doctors don't include herpes testing in their standard STI panel, and it is something you have to actually request a lot of doctors to do. But if you do request it, understand that it's not going to be the most reliable test results. Knowing your body and knowing your symptoms are going to be the best way of knowing whether you actually have any form of herpes simplex. So if pretty much everyone has it, including people who never have symptoms, and those who do have symptoms can treat it and manage it easily and probably not spread it, then why is it so heavily stigmatized? For many people, the shame around herpes is the worst symptom of it. Surveys around the heaviest stigmas we have in our culture place herpes just under HIV and above mental illness and substance abuse, which we all know are so heavily stigmatized in our culture. If you head to any forum online where people are discussing recent diagnoses, the words struggling and devastating pop up all over the place. Marriages are ended, sex lives are ruined, all because of the same virus that causes chickenpox. But even though the herpes virus has been around basically since humans have been around, we have records of it from our earliest records of medicine, the stigma around herpes didn't actually pop up until around 40-ish years ago. And why is that? Money. The answer is always money, guys. And what is it that brings in money? Fear and sensationalism. Well, there is a theory going around the zeitgeist, and by the zeitgeist, I mean the internet, that the pharmaceutical companies did create the stigma around herpes in order to sell their antivirals, which, listen, it happens a lot. We all know the pharmaceutical industry is not the most ethical place. In this case, the timing of the launch of antivirals around the time of the herpes stigmatization might have actually been a coincidence. And while the pharmaceutical companies absolutely did take advantage of people's fear in order to make money, which I will touch on later, it seems that the explosion of the herpes stigma was actually more due to just a general lull in the fear-mongering market for sensationalist media outlets. I got a lot of my information about the process of the stigmatization of herpes from a very specific Slate article, which I will link below, but it seems like it mostly just filled a hole in something innocuous to suddenly make very, very scary for a lot of people. Herpes simplex 1 and 2 weren't even scientifically differentiated until 1967, but the media outlets of the 1970s were at a loss on what to write about. They knew that sex and fear sold magazines and newspapers, but they were stuck between the use of antibiotics to cure syphilis and gonorrhea and other venereal diseases such as those, and before the AIDS epidemic. But the early 1970s were still on the tail of the free love counterculture movements, which were less about a sort of promiscuous sex for everybody and with everybody sort of ideology, and more about separating the state from people's control over their own bodies, which we're still working on. So while there were still many articles being put out during the early 1970s emphasizing the sort of no big deal-ness of herpes, other magazines started to insist that this was an epidemic of both body and morality. And the peak of that coincided with the release of topical valacyclovir, the antiviral, in 1982. And while the invention of Zovirax, which was the name brand for topical valacyclovir at the time, was an immense breakthrough for anyone who dealt with any sort of herpes sore, whether that's oral, genital, chickenpox, shingles, it also came at a prime time for profit. And like I said earlier, while I absolutely don't put it past pharmaceutical companies to, well, it's not even an opinion. We know that pharmaceutical companies will stir up controversy in order to jack up the price of medications in order to sell more and to sell at a higher profit. And Williams-Burroughs, the company that released Zovirax, did end up hiking the price up in 1985 when they realized how useful and therefore profitable the drug was. It actually probably was a coincidence that it came out right around the time that this herpes epidemic was stirring up in the media. Drug research does, after all, take many, many years before it can come anywhere near the market. However, the media sensation did kind of settle down once people realized, oh, I can take a single pill for this or put on a cream and it will fix the problem. I'm not sure if that's an argument for or against the idea that pharmaceutical companies were fanning the flames, but some of this was due to how difficult it is to sensationalize something you can just treat. But a lot of it was due to the emergence of HIV and AIDS as the new headline feature. And while the actual herpes frenzy was sort of short-lived in the span of everything, only a few years, that stigma stuck around with tabloid fodder like this, mimicking headlines like this from other tabloids, and even big name magazines like Time putting out covers like this. Here's another one that has nothing to do with herpes, but I think it's my new life motto, actually. I'm gonna put that right there. The only way to remove stigma around a topic is to talk about it, to openly discuss it. And that's kind of the whole point of this channel, the whole point of, I don't know, everything I do, and why I'm annoying at parties. Herpes is no worse than the common cold, and yet people are too ashamed to even talk about it, which is why I put my own herpes blister in the thumbnail. I've solved the stigma. You're welcome. But really, if anyone would like to discuss further or ask any more questions, please feel free to leave a comment, to message me on Instagram if you'd like a little more privacy. I will put my Instagram handle somewhere. I think it's also linked on my page. Please like this video. Please share it around. As I said, we gotta talk about this shit. And subscribe to me. I would like that. It would make me feel good. And I also made this jacket last week, and I think it's really cool, and I'm really proud of it. So I'm going to show that to you. Subscribe to me for that. I don't do that on this channel, but I don't know. Maybe I will in the future if you subscribe. Probably not. Anyway, bye.